The market was crowded, dusty, and loud, filled with the smell of animals and shouting sellers. Among all the goats and cows, a small cage held a thin lion cub, its fur patchy, claws showing, and teeth bared in a low snarl. People stepped back, laughing nervously, some calling it dangerous, while others said it should just be killed or left to die. Everyone ignored it, except for one cowboy, who stopped and looked at the cub. Most saw anger and aggression, but he saw something else in its eyes, a flicker of fear hiding behind all that growling. The seller noticed him staring and chuckled, asking for almost nothing, just 30 cents. Without a word, without arguing, the cowboy dropped the coins into the man's hand and took the cage, leaving the crowd murmuring in disbelief. Everyone was wondering, why would anyone bother with that scared little cub? The cowboy's name was Jack, and he was in his late 30s, a man of few words. He lived alone on the edge of the dry, sun-baked land in a small, weathered ranch that seemed to stretch into nothing. People in town knew him as quiet and fair, the kind who never started trouble but didn't run from it either. There were whispers about a family he had lost long ago, but Jack rarely talked about the past and no one pressed. He had a way of noticing the broken things others ignored, the cracked fence posts, the abandoned dogs, the lonely faces in a crowd. When he looked at the tiny snarling cub, something inside him recognized itself. Fear, anger, and the desperate need for someone to see you, that was the cub. And that had been him too. Slowly, carefully, he reached into the cage, and the cub hesitated, unsure if this quiet stranger could be trusted. The cub thrashed in its cage as soon as they left the market, teeth gnawing the bars, claws scratching at the metal. Most people would have yelled or tried to force it down, but Jack didn't touch it. He just rode steadily, his hands loose on the reins, speaking in a low, calm voice that didn't demand anything. Dust rose from the dry trail, the sun beating down, and for hours there was almost nothing but silence. Gradually, the cub's growls grew softer. Its eyes flicked toward him, curiosity replacing some of the anger. By the time they reached the ranch, the space between them felt safe. The wide, empty land around them gave the cub room to breathe, room to stop fighting. Jack didn't rush, and slowly, the cub began to settle, testing for trust in the quiet patience of a stranger who refused to hurt it. For days, the routine was simple and quiet. Every morning, Jack brought food and water, leaving them at the same spot, making sure there was plenty of shade and space for the cub to feel safe. He didn't force anything, didn't reach into the cage, just sat nearby reading, fixing his tools, or watching the wind move across the dry land. At first, the cub refused the food, snatching at nothing but growling and pacing. Slowly, hesitantly, it began to eat. The growls became shorter, less fierce, and Jack didn't celebrate or rush. He knew the small changes mattered more than words. Nights were long and quiet, the sounds of distant coyotes, and the wind through the empty fields, filling the ranch. The cub stayed alert, tense, but something had begun to shift. Every small action, every patient moment, built a rhythm that felt safe, and even in the silence, trust was growing. One afternoon, something unexpected appeared near the ranch, a snake slithering close to the water, or maybe a wild dog sneaking into the yard. The cub leapt instantly, teeth bared, claws ready, growling like the world was ending. Jack didn't panic. He stepped slowly between the cub and the danger, holding his hand out, speaking in the same calm voice he always used. "Easy," he said, and the cub froze, its eyes meeting his without the usual fear. For the first time, the little lion looked at him like he might actually understand. Jack knelt a little, smiling softly, and said, "Leo," giving the cub a name that was simple but steady, like him. In that moment, it was clear. The aggression wasn't mindless. It was instinct, fear, and a need to survive. And for the first time, trust was real. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in, or maybe a gunshot echoed from a nearby ranch, or the old tractor roared unexpectedly. The noise terrified Leo, and in a blind panic, he broke through the enclosure and disappeared into the dark. Jack spent the night searching, calling softly, his heart heavy with guilt and worry. Every shadow made him flinch. What if Leo got hurt? What if someone else saw him and tried to kill him? Hours later, he found the cub trapped between rocks, a cut on his leg, shaking and exhausted. Without hesitation, Jack risked himself to free Leo, moving carefully, speaking in the calm voice that had begun to mean something to the little lion. That night, the bond between them grew stronger, forged in fear, pain, and the desperate need to protect one another. A few weeks later, Jack took Leo into town for supplies, and people stopped in their tracks. Whispers turned into shocked murmurs as someone recognized the cub. An older man stepped forward, explaining what no one had known. Leo had been taken from the wild as a tiny cub, forced into cages, trained to fight, and mistreated so badly that his anger had been all he had to survive. The crowd fell silent, some lowering their heads in shame at how quickly they had judged. And through it all, Leo sat quietly beside Jack, calm and safe. No growls, no fear, just trust. In that moment, everyone, including the audience, realized how wrong they had been. The little cub wasn't dangerous by nature. He had been hurt, and patience, care, and quiet understanding had shown him another way. 2.5 months later, Leo was no longer the thin, snarling cub in the market. He had grown stronger and taller, his muscles sleek and alert. Yet there was a calmness in him that hadn't existed before. He followed Jack around the ranch without chains, moving with the quiet confidence of a predator who didn't need to prove anything. He wasn't tamed, he was trusting. Jack often thought back to that small moment at the market. When 30 cents had bought more than a cub, it had bought a chance. Sitting on the porch, watching Leo rest in the shade, he understood clearly. Fear is learned. Violence is taught, and trust takes time. Small choices can change a life, sometimes more than anyone could imagine. Fear fades. Trust grows. Patience changes everything.